Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's Elephant Professional Lecture, I'm very pleased to introduce this lecture because it's a subject I know absolutely nothing about. So I'm very anxious to hear what goes on and how we can help people and help elephants better. One of the things I talk about a lot when I'm doing my live stream or when I'm thinking or when I go to meetings about wild elephants is building elephant corridors and being able to reconnect connected areas and elephant habitats to allow elephants to flow through the countryside as they would have done in the old days. Now, of course, one of the major obstacles to that everywhere where there are elephants and people is that where you want to build a corridor, there are quite often people living in the way, and it's their ancestral land, and the village may have been bigger than it was in the old days when elephants truly did flow through the countryside. And so there might be conflict, and of course you can't just move a village of people and tell them to move to live in another place. That's been tried a lot in the past, and it didn't really work out very well for the people, and often didn't work out well for the elephants. So I'm very happy to introduce Prerna Bindra, who was introduced by a mutual friend, a poet who's writing a book on everything elephants to me. So, and very nice to meet you as well, because this is the first time we've actually seen each other, despite correspondence going back and forth for several months. And she will explain her PhD, which is called, or not the PhD is not called, but it's the subject of the presentation is Making Room for Wildlife and a New Life for People, Relocation from Protected Areas. And in fact, there is actually, I should say, a case going on in Thailand right at the very moment. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, or 2 or 3 nights ago, there was an attempted relocation, and it's a bit of a cause célèbre at the moment. So it was a forced one. So people in Thailand, please listen up, because this is how you can do it nicely and make the world a better place. So over to you, Prerna, and thank you very
much. Thanks so much for that kind introduction. Before I begin, I would like to thank John and the good people from the Golden Triangle Asian Elephant Foundation for this opportunity to speak at this prestigious platform, and always for giving elephants a voice. So I'm going to be talking about conservation-related resettlement from India, with a perspective mainly from Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary, which I will come to and explain where it is, and explaining the impacts on people, on wildlife, why it happens, etc. I am currently just started my PhD in Cambridge. Otherwise, I'm a wildlife conservationist and I'm a writer, and I'm also on the board of this foundation called Hathi Sathi, which means Friend of Elephants. Before I begin, my thanks to photographers who have contributed mostly unwittingly to this presentation. This is clearly a very stressed elephant in a human dominated landscape. This is in Eastern India. To give you a larger picture about India, since we have people from across the globe here, India is the second most populated country in the world. We have over 1.3 billion people. That's about 16% of the world's population in just about 2.5% of the global land area. It's a fast growing economy. It has ambitions for a double-digit GDP, a huge emphasis on economic growth, yet at the same time, you have high levels of poverty as well. What this means is that there is intense pressure on land for infrastructure, industry, roads, highways, mines, dams, and at the same time, desperately poor people who depend on forests for their livelihood sustenance, like fuel, fodder, collection of minor forest produce, etc. Now, on the wildlife side, India is one of the top biodiverse countries of the world. It harbors 23% of the world's terrestrial carnivore species, such as tigers, wolves, leopards. What you see here is a leopard in a national park. And as you can see, it is walking through this narrow alleyway, which is where people live. We also have large mega herbivores like elephants and boars of the Indian bison, etc. Protected areas cover about 5% of India's land. So this is just about half of the global average, which is 10. And even this 5%, many of it is fragmented. And our protected areas are small. So the average would be about 230 square kilometers. So a densely populated country, a mega biodiverse country means you have people and wildlife living in close proximity. And now elephants. So the way I go about this presentation is I give you a brief about India. I will talk to you briefly about the reality of elephants in India and then move on to relocation. So India has 60% of the global Asian wild elephants, so Elephas maximus population. About 75% of these elephants live outside the protected areas in India. So you have elephants living amongst people largely in human dense landscapes. Elephants are deeply rooted in Indian culture. When we think national parks or when we think of the history of protected areas, we think Yellowstone National Park in USA, which is believed to be the first protected area in the world. That I think was around the end of the 18th century, or early 19th century. But in India, the first elephant sanctuaries date back to 300 BC, and you have this Artha Shastra, which was authored by Kautilya, dating back to the same times, which talks about setting aside elephant sanctuaries and having guards protect them. And also you had setting up hospitals for elephants, for treatment of elephants, essentially because elephants are very prized also as war animals. So it dates, it's very linked to Indian culture and life. And of course, we worship elephants. It is our beloved god, Lord Ganesha. He's considered the god of good fortune and any occasion of significance in our lives, whether it be buying a new house or starting a new business, you evoke Lord Ganesha. And Indians have lived with elephants for hundreds of years. And while there has always been conflict, when you look back at gazetteers and old records or even texts, there is conflict, but at a very low level. And I visited a state called Jharkhand, which is northeast-ish India, and I spoke to people, the old people there, the wise old men and women, and they tell me of a time 30 years back, 20 years back, 40 years back, when elephants used to come in the village. They wouldn't even know. Elephants walk silently. They wouldn't even know that elephants had come. When they woke up in the morning, if there was rain, they would see footprints like this. And they said, oh, Gajraj had come at night, Gajraj being elephant, God. And they felt that they were blessed because the elephants had been, there was no damage. They wouldn't even realize the elephants were there. But now these were very prime forest areas, which are now, and also very prime coal areas. So these areas have now been, the forests have been ravaged by mines, destroyed by mines. And now when the elephants come, they bring with them conflict, they destroy crops, they destroy houses, property to get at grain. Sometimes people are injured, even killed. And the people are upset, they are distressed, they have this intense hate towards elephant, but also a reverence, and they feel helpless. And they also realize that the elephant is as helpless as them. They say, where will Gajraj go? Where will the elephant go? We have taken away their conflict plagues not just India, but most elephant ranges globally. And it is a product of a complex set of factors such as habitat loss, fragmentation, devastation, degradation of forests, and coupled with easy availability of crops as fodder. That's protein, power-packed protein, which is easily available and while your forests are degraded, devastated. But the conflict is exceedingly severe in India. We lose about 400 to 500 people every year. More than a person a day is killed by elephants. And then there is crop damage. So over 500,000 cultivators suffer serious crop damage. Now, what the research I did, and I will speak about it later, in a sanctuary in southern India, most of the respondents had about 30% crop loss to other herbivores, but mainly elephants. And some had lost in one night their entire harvest, all their savings finished in one night. I met people like that. And this was a very defining moment in my life. This picture is something I came across after the Twin Towers in New York had been blown up, the terror attack in 9/11 terror attack. And this picture, this incident happened after that. And this was in a state called Assam in Northeast India. This elephant, poisoned, is lying in a pool of muck and its own congealed blood. On its flank is written Dhan Chor Bin Laden, which means paddy thief Bin Laden. And to me, my heart shook. And it affected a lot of us conservationists here in India, because God, what had happened? How had Ganesha morphed into a thief, Dhan Chor Bin Laden, a terrorist? How had God become a terrorist and a thief? So obviously, with this kind of devastation to lives and livelihood, we see a retaliation. When elephants enter fields, when they enter human habitation, people retaliate. And there is these kinds of, they chase elephants, fire is thrown, there is noise, the elephants are terrorized, it escalates conflict even further because you have panicked elephants, you have this huge mobs of people. Incidentally, I have a court case going on in India against the throwing of fire on elephants because of the intense cruelty and the escalation of elephants that it creates. At the same time, as I said, we have this very complex relation, not just with elephants, but most wild animals. It's a contradictory kind of relation. While we also grieve when elephants die. It's just, how do you live with such large creatures? It's a complex problem that we face. So this condemnum was very excellently captured by a conservation scientist who's also a talented artist, which depicted how stressful this situation is for both people and for elephants. So there are various means that the government has outlined, that managers have outlined to mitigate conflicts, but most of them are to keep elephants away, to restrict their movement by the use of trenches and fences, and these are railway fences. But elephants, as we know, need large spaces. They migrate, they need to migrate. It's their ecology. And going against their ecology doesn't work, and we have fatal consequences. Again, my case in the court advises against such uses. So we also have other means to mitigate conflict, some of which have been successful, such as the monitoring of elephant populations in human-dominated landscapes. This has been done in certain parts in southern India, where you monitor the populations, and then you have alert system through social media like WhatsApp, and through local TV stations, through mics which go around to alert, and local TV to alert people that, look, elephants are here, these are the places to be avoided. And coupled with a lot of other things, and it's a collaborative effort, locally, the conflict has truly dropped to almost minimal this thing. And Hathi Sathi that I told you about, we do something similar This is in Northeast India in Bengal, where you train chokidars. When you say chokidars, where you train guards, local people to control the mobs, to keep the mobs away while elephants get safe passage through these corridors which connect fragmented forests. Besides that, you also sensitize local people, you make them aware. We are trying to now have a compensation kind of a scheme and a lot of other measures to ensure that they get safe passage. Now, I come to my subject, voluntary relocation or relocation from protected areas, conservation-related resettlement, as a means to alleviate conflict. Though I must admit here that that is not the primary purpose, and I will explain more about this later. I did my master's in conservation leadership 2 years back in the University of Cambridge, and my project there, as my research project there, I studied this particular issue. But before again I move on to Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary in India, very briefly on the global scenario. Conservation-related resettlement refers to the displacement linked to creation, expansion, and management of protected areas. And it might not mean necessarily the physical displacement of people physically moving away. It could mean the alienation of people from resources that they depend upon for their survival and their sustenance, which were in these protected areas, but now they are, because of the restrictions and regulations, they are unable to access them. Such resettlements have caused the displacement of an estimated 10 to million people globally. They continue currently. They are scholarships shows that most have further impoverished these people. They have become disconnected with their identity, history, culture. It has led to landlessness, marginalization. So they're widely criticized, and they're said to be no different from displacement linked to development and other industrial activities. Now, in India, we have, as I told you, 5% of India is protected area. And we have, and these are also densely populated. There are over 4.3 million people living in in the protected area system. A larger number depend on them for their sustenance. In the past 30 years, only about 2% have moved out. In contemporary India, conservation-related relocations have mainly happened since 1973. This was the time when wildlife laws were enacted. When Project Tiger was initiated, it was the biggest global conservation initiative of its time. 9 reserves were mapped out, and people were moved in from some of these reserves. They were said to be disastrous. They were said to be poorly documented. They are poorly documented. They are said to be largely forced and mismanagement displacements. Though I have read accounts of them being empathetic, and strangely, I have come across recently, as I'm digging through this project, of people who were relocated then, and over the years they have now become assimilated to life outside. Regardless, these were not done in the it was an act of injustice in many ways. In 2006 was another timeline, an important timeline on the history of relocation in India, when in 2005, we had what we call a severe tiger crisis, where there were local extinction of tigers. Incidentally, tigers is India's national animal. And the elephant in India is India's national heritage animal. Anyway, to get back, in 2005, there was a tiger crisis, and the government of India, through its Ministry of Environment and Forests and an expert committee that it constituted, announced a series of policy measures to strengthen tiger conservation. And as part of this, it prioritized, it said that tigers need inviolate areas, undisturbed areas, and from core areas of tiger reserves, they were to be made inviolate, and people were to be relocated to make that happen. And recognizing that earlier there was an injustice done to people, that people had suffered. This was mandated to be voluntary. If people did not want to go, they wanted to be shifted out. It was a incentivized relocation, where there was a package that was put in place, where financial compensation of land was to be given to the people. And it required such relocation to be fully informed, just, voluntary, incentive-based. Safeguards were put in place. There had to be individual consent from each relocated person, family unit, as well as the overall consent of the village's representative local body. And unlike many countries where such relocations are financed by large NGOs, etc., this was totally financed by the government. However, in spite of all these safeguards, there is a gap between policy and practice, and there is heavy criticism of this particular policy, where it is said that India is undermining people for tigers, the welfare of people for tigers. And there are studies which indicate there are forced or induced displacement from parks such as Puno and Chanakmar. These are tiger reserves in central India. And that this has led to further destitution of the people, marginalization of the people due to various reasons, such as land quality being poor, not proper rehabilitation, no proper long-term follow-up, and it has led to further migration, distress, economic instability, uprootedness, etc. On the other hand, there are also reports that relocated people have benefited, that the resettlement has been voluntary. Now, there is one park, Rajaji National Park, in the northwest of India, and it has elephants, it has tigers, it has leopards. And here the people have said that they wanted to move out. In a survey, 97% of the respondents said that, because they wanted to improve their well-being. And because they saw other people doing better in once they had moved out. And similarly, in southern India, in Bhadra Tiger Reserve, which is considered to be a model of relocation, this relocation happened sometime in 2002, I think, and that it has led to a better social economic status of the people, because they get more business and employment opportunities once they move out of remote forests, which have no roads, which have you don't have access to bazaars, you don't have access to markets, to schools, to good hospitals. So moving out has given them access to all of this and given them better business and employment opportunities. Now, conflict and relocation. Human-wildlife conflict, in a study done of 4 reserves in India, it was found that human-wildlife conflict is one of the main drivers why people want to move out. Their cattle is killed by tigers. This was a camera trap set in central India, which you can see 3 tigers, cubs, one mother, 2 cubs feeding on the carcass of a cow. So there's loss of livestock, there is loss of livelihood, as I mentioned earlier, and loss of even life. And when managers relocate people, there are villages. So typical reserve might have anything from 6 villages to 25 villages to 45 villages. They will prioritize villages which have higher conflict to be relocated first. My master's research reiterated this, that human wildlife, all the people I surveyed, I went to 7 villages, surveyed about 40 people. All of them said that, had in-depth interviews with them, and in group interviews, group discussions, individual interviews, spoke to women, spoke to young people, spoke to older people. All of them said that what the key reason was human-wildlife conflict, and mainly with elephants. They did not really wish the elephants any harm. They did not wish the wildlife any harm. They just wanted a distance. They did not want them as neighbors, but there were occasionally retaliatory killings. And I'll come to that later. So about Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary, it's a small reserve. It's just about 345 square kilometers. It has about 10,500, 700 people living within that 345 square kilometers. It has a high density of elephants. It's part of a larger landscape which has the highest population of Asiatic elephants in the world. This landscape of which also has about 70 tigers. It has other endangered species. It has other endemic species. It has bears. And it is also fringed with a high density population. So you have about, and here, you know, it's very interesting actually. The people here approached the high court, the courts of the country, of their state actually, that they wanted to move out. Now, this was not done by all the villages in the reserve. There are about 100 settlements, but some of the settlements, 4 settlements, went to court saying that they wanted to move out because they were living in utter poverty, having animal-like existence without even basic amenities to life, such as hospitals, schools, groceries, etc., etc. And any delay was causing them great injustice and irreparable damage to our lives. Now, because in protected areas, the laws do not allow for high levels of development, the villagers were denied these opportunities. There were basic primary health care. There were primary schools in these areas, in these villages. However, getting good doctors and teachers in these areas is a problem. Nobody wants to live in the forest. You won't get good doctors. They would prefer to live in a city rather than go in a remote jungle and suffer the difficulties that are there. My interest in Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary, this is, Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary is, as I showed you, right in the southern tip of the country. And I have known some of the people since 10 years. This is Shibu, who's become a friend. He used to travel to Delhi, which is the national capital in North India, which is hundreds of kilometers away, trying to get funding support for his community to shift out. And me being in Delhi and being connected and part of various high-level government policy-making bodies at that time, he would come and speak to us, speak to officers, try and meet with ministers, government of authorities, which he did. He himself got a very powerful voice he's a very powerful voice, to seek support, funding support for shifting out. They were finally shifted out. He had to initially drop out of school because when they used to go to school, through the jungle, 10 kilometers away, they would meet with elephants. It was dangerous. He said one of my friends, some of their neighbors had been killed on the way to school. He had to drop out of school. And then 2 years later, he shifted to a hostel outside. Today, he's a double MA and a teacher in Maldives. Anyway, to get back, the reasons, therefore, to relocate were poor incomes. There were no job opportunities inside. There were no roads, as I told you, no transport facilities because roads were poor. In rains, they were washed out. And they said that we have lived this life. We have experienced hardship. But for our children, we want education. We want them to have opportunities for jobs, and therefore they wanted to shift out. There were social issues. Marriage for young men was difficult because, people didn't want their daughters to suffer the hardships that they perceived in a forest. This picture is not from Wayanad, but is very representative of people living in elephant landscapes, where or in wildlife areas, all through you will find that they spend night after night after night in such flimsy machans on trees to drive wildlife away from their crops, to safeguard their crops. And the stress on them and the mental health, it tells on your health because you're just night after night spending, your nights here safeguarding your crops. So the human-wildlife conflict in Wayanad is intense. This man I met lost his 5-year-old son to an elephant while he was going to school. His elder son was severely injured while he was harvesting crops by an elephant. the period that you see, there have been 48 human deaths, 84 injuries, so much crop damages. And they said that fear is a constant companion for us. We always have to be on the alert. When you're walking the forest, when you're just stepping out of your home, you just have to be on the alert. And they struggle with consistent crop loss, limited livelihood opportunities, etc., etc. Post relocation, when I met them 5 years later, 3 years later, they said they had higher income due to access to market. There were job and business opportunities. There was good education. They had now moved out to where there were roads, where there were they had communications, they had internet facility, they had TV. These are aspirational things that they have. They are exposed to this society, and the impacts went beyond the materialistic. This man I met said that when they didn't have money to hire a vehicle to take their crops to the market, they would carry them on their heads. And when they went to the bazaar, to the market, they would be perceived as country bumpkins, as simplistic people, and they would be cheated. They wouldn't be given a good price for their product. Now, when they were by the road, they were outside, the buyers will come to them and they get a fair price for their product. So there were these, huge set of factors that I, very interesting, that I discovered when I spoke to them. There were problems. It's not an easy path. Not everybody assimilates easily, because this lady, there are issues of isolation, because when you're in a village, you're a close-knit unit, but when you relocate outside, you get scattered, those bonds disintegrate. There's a loss of culture, tradition. Sometimes some people are not able to assimilate, especially the tribals who are closely connected to the forest. So it's a very controversial, very fraught, very sensitive exercise. It requires a lot of empathy, a lot of hand-holding. And the process has to be seen as rehabilitation, not just relocating and forgetting it. And you need to be giving them the best deal at every kind of facility. I have seen that everything from helping them identify the land, through helping them with all the documentation which is required through the process. So giving them all the facilities like water, electricity, etc., etc. So the forest officers whom I met said it is one of the most difficult tasks that they do, is relocation of people. And they said it's only possible when we put people first and do this. This is only from the policies only from protected areas, mainly from tiger reserves. India has about 51 tiger reserves. That's 2% of the land area. However, from 2 or 3 corridors, people have been relocated. I particularly know of one in South India and one in Central India, where the people have come forward and said, we want to go because of the intense conflict and we want these facilities. And of course, for wildlife, while there are again many schools of thought, but it is been recorded that once the anthropogenic pressure is removed from within these core areas, wildlife has bounced back. This we have seen in Rajaji National Park, where I said 97% of the people had wanted to move out from that one village. Tigers have come back there. There are photographs of tigers and camera traps. This elephants from a village, this where you see them was once a human habitation in Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary called Gollur. This is my photograph. This is again that meadow where people used to live, and you see herds of cheetal there now. Yesterday, one of the residents sent me a beautiful video of a bear doing a little jig against this tree, and I can share it later if you would like. And this, again, one of the relocated places. So yes, it's a difficult exercise, but it has helped elephants gain some habitat. It has helped people gain a new life in some places. In some places, it has led to distress. So yeah, I think I will end here now. Namaste and thank you.
Namaste. Thank you very much. um, yeah, very, very interesting. I love that you have the this lawsuit. I know it's not part of the subject, the lawsuit against throwing of fire and various other things as well. So that's a great way forward, and that would be very interesting to hear that, see how that goes, and best of luck to change that, because that really is one of the things that I have seen escalates the problems quite drastically. Um, as far as questions go, do we have any questions on the Zoom? We have a couple of people in. Would anybody like to unmute themselves and ask a question? Or do we have any on the Facebook? Nisa, you're there. Would you like to unmute yourself, and any questions?
So I'm waiting for some question from Facebook. I think we'll give them a few more minutes to type it up as well. I actually have a couple questions that I have on my own. So let's see. So for the situation that you have over in India, it's basically a little bit different from Thailand, I think. So it's basically the people that are actually living in the center of the wildlife sanctuary, correct? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
So people are basically, because they are confined to, I guess, save the animals themselves, they were not allowed to move out, kind of situation.
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Yep. So I think the biggest problem for the people, it's basically because they weren't allowed to move out of the wildlife sanctuary because there wasn't any provision that was going to be provided for them, correct?
So when the sanctuaries were demarcated, there were already people there, and what happens is when a sanctuary is demarcated, a set of rules and regulations of sanctuary or a national park comes into place. So you do give them rights for collection of forest produce, etc. But you cannot bring development in terms of having highways or having hospitals or there are schools, as I said, primary schools in many of these parks. But there are situations where you have to cross, say, 20 streams to get to or a river to get to a village. So it's not feasible also, even if it were to be allowed to take a road where there are 20 households. So there are these situations. People are very attached to their land. It's not that they always want to move out. And they kind of continue to live there, but as they get more and more exposure, so what has happened is the older people stay, but because there are no livelihood opportunities, the young go out, they get exposure to the world outside, and then they want that life. So it's a mix. Some of them don't want to go, some of them want to go. So usually, and I'm not saying this is universal, but largely the practice is, especially as far as tiger reserves are concerned, funding is limited. So only when it comes from the people that we want to move out is it initiated. Now, there are cases, as I said, where people may not want to move out and it's induced displacement in terms of, because there is a policy. But largely, and as I mentioned in case of Wayanad and Bhadra and Rajaji, people are coming out themselves that we want to move because of this set of factors. I hope I am able to explain properly.
That's interesting. So once the people move out, do you have some researchers that goes back and see whether the animals definitely will be repopulating themselves over in those area, but do the animals go after the people? Like, do they still follow the trails of people around?
No, it's almost, I hope I'm not being politically insensitive, but it's almost magical the way wildlife bounces back. It's, within a year, you'll see tiger pug marks and leopard pug marks and herds of elephants moving in, and it's just magical. And no, they don't follow people, and we do have researchers, not in all areas, but in many areas we do have researchers, or even camera traps put in place. And I've gone to a village from where a village was relocated about 8 months back, and I saw leopard there, I saw herds of elephant there, I saw, so and more importantly, we need NGOs, we need forest people, we need, other departments like say, health department, education department, to help the people outside. So I think more emphasis is needed there. And in certain cases, like what made Bhadra successful was because we had people, an NGO involved. We had very empathetic officers. We had a very good, not just a forest department, but administrative officers who helped the people, gave the land that was given to them was very good. They were given all and every, the land was tilled and given to them. It was irrigated land. There were schools, there were, so that I think it's the people part which needs careful, empathetic attention. And only then, we can gain support for something like this.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Austin here from Zambia. Thank you very much for a very insightful talk. I tried to follow. I had some internet interruptions, but I got, I think, most of your issues. In case you have already talked about this, I want you to say something again, specifically to voluntary relocations. Do the people who choose to move out of the reserve also choose where to go? Or the decision of where to go, the destination, is decided by government or a different group? That is my question. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alston. I'm delighted to see you here. He was part of my cohort in MPhil and a colleague and friend, therefore. Alston, that's an interesting question also. So we have, as part of this, there are two packages for relocation. You have either you are given money, a certain amount of money for a family member. So anybody over 18 would qualify as a family member. There are some intricacies to it for which I won't go into. The other option is that you are given land. So people do have a say. It's not like this is the land we'll give you. So people will, we have, the government officers have some land in mind. Land is very scarce, so this is very difficult. Actually, forests are being cut to accommodate them outside also. But they are given a choice. So there are cases where they go and they say, no, this is not what we want. The land is not good here. We want to go here. And in Wayanad, where I went, many of the people went in the money, they chose to go out with money. So they're asked, do you want to go out with money? Do you want to go out with land? Ideally, always does not happen. But usually when it's money, they are left to themselves. But if they say, no, we want help, where should we go? How do we get land? Because people who go out, they may not know how it works outside. So the, officials go help them get the paperwork done. And yeah, you are being cheated, not being cheated. Yes, this land is good. Yes, this land is not good. So yes, there is an element of choice. And I've known of people who have rejected the land which was offered to them and tried to go elsewhere. And it was seen that, they get that land. That's not always ideal, but they definitely have a say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Prerna.
So, yeah, I have a question from, from Mr. Didit from Waikumbas, Sumatra, in Indonesia. And he asked whether, how is the spatial arrangement for elephants in India, especially elephants, so that they are able to share space with humans for the present and the future?
What was the first part of the question? How is the
spatial arrangement for elephants in India?
Spatial arrangement.
Spatial.
Spatial.
Oh, yeah.
So that they coexist. Yeah, I did. See, so India has what are called elephant reserves. Unfortunately, elephant reserves have no legal standing. They don't have legal protection. So you can, I mean, we have, we've just been fighting a particular elephant reserve, which was denotified because they wanted to expand an airport, and that airport was already eating into elephant habitat, and therefore conflict in that area has increased. So it's a very, very problematic issue of I mean, how does this giant, gentle giant, which is exist in increasingly fragmented forests. Key elephant corridors have been identified. There is a move to try and give them some grade of protection, so that at least mines and such damaging industries do not, because they irrevocably, elephants can penetrate through fields, but they cannot penetrate through mines, or so there are efforts, but it's a very, very long haul. It's a very, very long haul, because pressures from, as you might imagine, such kind of development and infrastructure is huge. So there are such plans in place from mitigation in very from the ground up to these policy issues, but it's a very, very difficult one. It's a very difficult one. I think the elephants are the most gentle and the most at peace when you see them in these protected areas where there is least disturbance, where there's no stress, where they are just allowed to be elephants.
I see. Let's see. Another question from Dr. Pichet. He is actually one of our, I guess, lead researchers on the human-elephant conflicts in Thailand. So he asked whether in your research, which factors or policies that help people make the decision to relocate outside the protected areas?
I think that's a very important question. One was the set of factors that I told you about, is the lack of facilities, the aspirational level, etc., which oh shit.
Is everything okay? Prerna?
Sorry, am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
we still hear you.
Sorry.
I can hear you.
Yeah, there was a net issue or whatever issue. I just went blank. So, to get back to my question, what actually also helped, and what is key to people deciding to relocate or it being a success is the trust that they have in the government officials who are there, or the should I say the implementing authority, which in this case was the Forest Department, but also equally important are what we call the collector or the divisional commissioner, who once they move out, the land is theirs, and all the other facilities that they need, the water pipeline, the primary healthcare center, the primary school, the roads, it comes into the hands of the collector or the divisional commissioner. So both in Bhadra and in Wayanad, these implementing authorities worked very well. Right at the bottom, you had these frontline forest staff who would be dealing with this, and I saw a faith in the implementing authority. I think transparency is key, empathy is key. So besides those push factors, one village will go out, but if that village does not fare well, the rest will stay back, and that has happened. That has happened in some reserves, because one village didn't fare well, the rest say no, But here, village after village moved out because they saw that they were leading a better life. So I think that transparency, that empathetic, good leadership, which and going that extra mile, to help these people. And yesterday, in fact, we just had a talk on a similar issue, and one of the people who actually implemented this in the field, he said that for 2 years, when this whole process was going on in Bhadra, we didn't go home. We didn't know what home was. Till the people actually were settled in. You were getting them out, and it's a very difficult transition. And I know in Wayanad, so they have the village deity back in the forest. So with huge ceremony, this village deity was brought out with all the band and everything, and all the ceremony. It was then placed in the new village. So I think all of that is critical.
Did trust have to be rebuilt? I know with particularly the Thai one that I'm thinking of, this village has been in very heavy and one-sided conflict. One-sided as in one side have guns and the other don't. Conflict for many years, decades, in fact. How was that similar in Wayanad, or was there was there no conflict beforehand, or only limited conflict?
Sorry, your voice broke. I mean, the signals are not very clear. So again, I lose the first part of the question.
Okay. Did conflict have to be did trust have to be rebuilt? Was there extreme conflict beforehand between the villagers and the authorities?
Oh, very, very relevant question. It is strange, because on one hand, the villagers, the forest authorities, because they're in this remote place, the forest is the only government authority they know, really. And like when I asked them, suppose a person fell ill, this guy who had climbed a tree and he fell down, or there was a difficult pregnancy, or a man was attacked by a bear, how would they go out? So they would either be carried on a charpoy and a bed and carried out 8 miles down to the nearest town, or 12 miles down, or they would if they were able to, they would call the forest ranger. And if they were able to get through to him, then they would immediately use their vehicle to move the people out. This was universal in every area. This is what the forest department does. However, obviously, the forest department is also the implemented authority. If you are, cutting a tree, the forest department will say no, or will, use. So, or if you are grazing cattle in the core area where you're not supposed to, or collecting something because it's regulated, the forest department will come and say no. So there is a huge antipathy at times. And I have known in Wayanad where people have actually, when I landed in Wayanad, when I went to meet the forest officer, he had been given police protection in the office itself, because there had been a tiger attack and the people were angry, and they were turning, attacking the forest guys. So and again, it also depends on the individual officers also. Some officers or some rangers might not be very empathetic, but by and large, this trust was there. And you had a continuity of the same officer in Wayanad for many years. In Bhadra, you had a very good officer placed who actually saw it from the beginning to the end over 3 years. Though, of course, they had started demanding it many years back. But the actual implementation took, say, 3 years. And, you had the same authority in place who was empathetic and who took it on as a project. And it had to be built at every step of the way, but there was a foundation as well, because they knew that the forest department does help them during times of there's anger. Yes, your elephants are destroying my crop, your tigers kill my cattle. And also what the forest department did was place in every village or cluster of 2-3 village settlements, 5 settlements, one local level guy as what they called Mitra. I can't remember the name, but essentially it meant a friend of the village or some such, who any grouse or complaint during the process, any difficulty during the process, they would go to this person who would visit every house in a like twice a week or once a week or whatever it was, and then take that to the concerned authority so that it was resolved. So, all these kind of measures, in certain cases, NGOs also played that role. So all of these helped build that trust and that, to carry the process out.
Thank you. Nisa, any more questions?
I don't have any more questions from Facebook. Thank you.
Okay,
No, please.
brilliant. Well, brilliant. Well, in that case, all that remains for me to say is thank you very much, Prerna, for a fantastic presentation and a very, very interesting subject. And I'm glad Dr. Bichev was here as well to have a listen in, and a lot of things that we can learn. You may be hearing from him as well. A lot of things we can learn in Thailand and for the rest of the world. Obviously, every country situation is different. Every set of laws is different, which makes life very complicated. But there will be lessons that can be moved across. So, thank you very, very much for that. Just to finish, a quick plug for our sponsors, the Anantara Hotel, who have very kindly let me sit here. I've come outside because the sun has gone down. I'm sitting here by the pool. I can see our elephants down there. The moon is rising. It's very beautiful.
I was just going to say that it looks so stunning, and the elephants of Thailand someday. Oh my God, you're sitting in such a beautiful place.
Or do come and see us, and if you are in Thailand at the moment, do come up and visit the Anantara. It's a lovely place, and when the rest of the world can travel, please do come to see us. If you want to see more of the elephants, come and join us on the daily live streams. We've got one more day of them this week, and then we will start again next week at 7:30 in the morning and 4 p.m. every day during the week. And yes, that's it. So thank you very much, Prerna. Fantastic presentation. Great work. And we'll hear more one day about your wider work and the work, the Hati Sati Foundation, and how you're helping elephants throughout India. So it's fantastic work, and thank you very much. And we will see everybody else for an elephant professional next week, or at 7:30 tomorrow morning for the lockdown live.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Indeed a pleasure. Thanks everybody for the patience. Thank you.